Well, hello there everyone! When we think of companies that make games with awesome boss fights, most people will probably think of something like From Software, Platinum Games, before the mass layoffs, or in my case, maybe Falcom. But before all of those, we had a company known as Treasure that made plenty of fast-paced, high-action games, especially for their time, pushing their hardware to the absolute limit, as well as the players. And we'd get games like Ikaruga, Radiant Silvergun, and the topic of today's video, Gunstar Heroes. Released on the Sega Genesis back in 1993, I personally consider it one of the top 3 best games on the console, alongside Sonic 3 and Knuckles and Phantasy Star 4. The levels were intense, the combat was fun, the weapon fusion mechanic was awesome, even if most chaser fusions kinda sucked, and the boss fights were some of the best of their time, using some crazy sprite trickery to have insane levels of animation and sometimes even appear to be moving in 3 dimensions. And remember, the Sega Genesis didn't have Mode 7 on it to help that out, so this is just some insane sprite trickery. But how did the 16 bosses in this game stack up? Well, let's belly flop on in and find out. Number 16, Smash Daisaku. The M. Bison parody himself is quite the meme lord, but he's not a very fun opponent to face in his final battle. He has 2 phases, which is neat, but the issue is how they're handled. Phase 1 is okay. He flies around the arena, sometimes going for a charge across the screen, sort of like Bison from the Street Fighter movie, or he'll drop down some bombs. The real problem is when his health bar runs out, and he reveals that he has a second phase. Phase 2 has him pacing back and forth across the arena, and if he gets close to you, he'll jump into the air and do an extended leg kick, which looks goofy. But he also has a grapple move, which basically has no startup animation, that tosses you into the air and does a flat 20 damage, which is always annoying, but the real part that stings is his flame gun. It has 2 shot modes, a DNA strand, which isn't actually bad, just find the gaps, and a homing shot that curves so heavily on hard mode, by the way, I played this game through on hard mode, that it's nearly impossible to properly dodge unless you are perfect with the timing or if you get lucky. But okay, it's a janky boss, that's not very fun, but maybe this doesn't scream bad tier for you? Well, let's not forget, he's at the end of not only one of the game's longest levels, but also the worst level, because it's a gauntlet of some of the strongest enemies in the game that just gets super monotonous, and there is no checkpoint here. You can get Smash Daisaku to phase 2 and low health, but if you die, it's back to the start of the stage. I abused the hell out of save states for this level to preserve my sanity, and I recommend you do so as well. Heck, the 3DS version, if you're playing on that, set up Mega Life mode and Gunslinger mode. It's more worthwhile than playing fairly. Number 15, Black Fly. You know, just because Black is a gambling man doesn't mean his boss fight needs to be luck-based. Okay, it's not technically luck-based, but I swear this is the most RNG heavy fight in the game, and not in a good way, because he could do his rotating beam attack that you can work around and just make sure that you don't get caught when he tries to spin it back towards you, or he could fly away and have you navigate a maze of energy beams that do contact damage, and their layout technically has a structure, but it's also semi-random with how drawn out the fight gets. It's just plain not fun. I guess I should be glad that his rematch isn't a shameless rehash and tries something different, but when that something different is just far less fun and thrown in the middle of one of the toughest boss rushes I've ever gone through in any video game, I suddenly don't mind abusing save states like a jackass very much. Number 14, Orange, Round 2. You fight Orange twice in the game. The first time is in his own stage, and the second is during an in-game boss rush. While all the other antagonists have wildly different boss fights, Orange is actually the same. Mostly. See, he's actually quite the downgrade, and I actually really like his first boss fight, so why is he so low here? Well, for one, the arena's a lot worse. Now, it's mostly just a flat arena without any real tricks to it, when his original arena was a lot more interesting, and we'll get to that when we get to it. The real issue, though, is his damage output. You see, almost every other boss in the game maxes out the amount of damage that they can deal to you in a single attack or combo at 20 damage, at which point you'll get stunned and fall over with some iframes. However, Orange does not have this restriction in his rematch, and instead, he will true combo you to death if you're not careful or just plain unlucky. So the best strategy to fight him is, well, originally it was melee combat. That's completely out the window now. So instead, you just have to take pot shots at him, and it basically turns into the game of if the snail touches you, you die. All I can say is, man, what a downgrade. Number 13, Pink Lobster. The pink lobster isn't bad, but it's kinda just there as a boss fight. See, she'll walk back and forth across the screen, hitting you with her claw or shooting out bubbles that, if they land, true combo you, so you're gonna be taking 20 damage if they hit you. And she also can make herself invincible by throwing up her claw. The best strategy here is to try and get a weapon that does piercing damage or splash damage and then lock her into spamming the bubbles. It's not exactly a bad fight, and I appreciate that her rematch isn't just a reskin battle, but at the same time, it doesn't have the same complexity that her original battle did, and there's a reason why this boss doesn't return in Gunstar Heroes, and instead the second battle against Pink has her turn into an Angel of Death, I guess. I wish they'd port Gunstar Heroes to Switch Online already, that game's awesome. Number 12, Duck Battalion. Before you can fight Pink, you have to battle her incompetent minions as the first of 5 bosses you have to tackle all in one go, and it's also okay. The boss has a very strict attack pattern of firing his guns out in front, doing a charge attack for really hard to dodge damage, then hop backwards while spamming its guns until it reaches the end of the screen and repeat. Do this ad nauseum until you lose too much HP on the warm-up act and decide it's time to reset, or be ready to abuse the crap out of save states. What is pretty neat though is that there is actually a second phase where after the mech is destroyed, Kane will rip one of the Gatling guns off the destroyed machine and needs to fight you himself. All he's really going to do is jump around the arena and fire it while being really weak to grapples, but it is neat, and after you beat him, he decides to see himself out of this game. Number 11, the mini-bosses. From Papaya Dance to Bravoo Man, this is the spot for the various mini-bosses throughout the game. Well, outside of one specific segment of the game, and those who've played it know exactly which part I'm talking about. The fights here are fine enough as mini-bosses doing their job well, and in the case of opponents like Bravoo Man, they even show off the game's pseudo 3D visuals with some serious sprite trickery. I honestly wish some of them had more HP to really show off their capabilities, because there's some cool fights here, but they lack the HP to really put up any measure of a fight at all. Number 10, Pinky Rotor. Pink makes the end of her run on this boss ranking with her original battle against the Pinky Rotor. I think the bullets can be a bit too absurd in number on hard mode, since there's only one weapon in the game that can cancel out bullets and it's the shortest range weapon in the game. But the boss has a cool feature where she has different limbs that can attack in different ways, and after being destroyed, she'll have to swap to alternate attack patterns depending on what's left. Not a bad boss overall, and for what will likely be the first boss most players encounter, or at least the first proper boss, I think she does a good job. Number 9, the Tram. All we had to do was follow the damn train, CJ. Anyways, the Tram is less of a boss fight and more of an event with you fighting off the evil army, but Smash Daisaku is here, so it gets some points and a spot on this list. Most of the early phases are just destroying the enemies, but the final phase, with Smash just throwing soldiers out at you as projectiles, is pretty dang funny, and I have to give mad props to that one soldier that just keeps running and booking it the entire time. I don't know how this man keeps up with the train, but I like to believe he survived this entire crash, since we never see him blow up. Number 8, Seven Force, Space Battle. For this battle, Treasure does what they do best, at least usually, and we have a boss fight in a space shooter-esque level. This fight would be a lot higher if it weren't for two major issues. The first is the lack of a checkpoint up to this part of the level, meaning death can be costly, because while not badly designed, this is a very tough level to get through. The second issue is lag. See, this is the one boss in the game that can experience some slowdown, and that can be a serious issue when the game suddenly starts running at normal speed again and Panther Force charges at you at Mach 2 after the game was moving in slow motion for the last 10 seconds. It is kinda cool seeing Seven Force combine all his different moves together, but let's just say there is actually a boss fight that I think did this idea much better in Gunstar Heroes, so if I cover that game, we'll talk about that then. Number 7, the Silly Dice Maze. This is the other set of mini-bosses that were excluded from the initial list because, for those who've played this game, Black's Silly Dice Maze stands out for all its creative and interesting shakeups thrown in. Some fights are super easy, some are just plain weird. These levels are challenges for you to try and overcome the best you can in sometimes creative ways. Some can be more straight up fights, but others, like the Core or the Black Gondola, require different approaches to beat them. Curry and Rice is a boss you have to defeat without using a weapon, and instead make use of the game's surprisingly decently designed melee combat system. And then there's other challenges which are like obstacle courses. It's weird, but I kinda like it. It also has the likes of Melon Bread, and I mean, come on, just look at him. How can you not like this guy? He's just here vibing. He doesn't even damage you. Number 6, Black beats Stepper. I think this boss does a much better job showing off Black's gambling addiction because it is still an RNG heavy boss fight, but now instead of it being bad, it's creative, as he'll roll a dice to determine the number of steps he takes, and where his feet land determine what attacks he's going to launch out. It isn't a super hard fight at all, but it does put up more of a challenge than the likes of the Pinky Rotor does, and it's a lot of fun. Honestly, one of the better examples of an RNG heavy boss fight I've seen in a video game. Plus, this also means he's one of only 3 bosses to use all the different weapon types in the game, an exclusive list including the final boss, and also one other foe in this game. Plus, I love how he throws you a fake gem at the end. Like, he knows he's lost, he just wanted to get one last blow in on you. But then you can proceed to combo him infinitely if you so wish. Number 5, Gunstar Green. Your old comrade that joined the other side, Gunstar Green is a master of martial arts, but also has a near impenetrable barrier to projectile attacks, so you have to face him head-on in one-on-one combat. If you have the HP, this fight is where melee is your best friend, and I do have to admit, the absurd difficulty this fight has at the end of a fairly long boss rush can be somewhat oppressive, but hey, if it's too hard, you can just get the Fire Lightning combo and tear him apart that way. I said this fight is really interesting, not that its 32-year-old AI can't be exploited like crazy. I know it's super cheap, but sometimes we gotta make do with what we got here, guys. Number 4, Gold and Silver. Here comes the climax. Gold and Silver is the final boss of Gunstar Heroes and might just be the hardest boss in the entire game, if not for the fact that there's mercifully, very mercifully, a checkpoint right before his boss battle. Despite being a lanky abomination trying to murder you, Gold and Silver is not the target here. Instead, it's the 4 elemental gems, and the way this fight progresses is kind of interesting, as it's one of 2 bosses that changes drastically depending on your difficulty level. Phase 1 sees the gems just kind of hovering around there, while Gold and Silver will rush to attack you. You can throw or kick him if you want to stun him, but bullets don't work. Then at 75% HP, he'll bring the jewels around him, and they'll be growing a bit more aggressive, with him still fighting you, but it's kind of in a similar way as a normal boss fight, albeit the jewels are bouncing around a bit crazily. The real shakeup is when he gets to 40% health, where the gems will come to life and begin unleashing their own powers of each of the different attack types to attack you, ranging from electric beams to chaser shots to a flamethrower that has no damage cap, so be careful. The thing is, on lower difficulties, Gold and Silver will actually retreat during this final phase and simply enter the tube himself, but on hard mode and up, he never retreats, meaning you've got to fight him off till the end. Does this change the game's ending at all? Sadly, no, but still, it's a well done final boss fight, with some creepy and memorable boss music to cap off a wonderful game. Number 3, the Core Guardian. While Gold and Silver may be a great cap-off to this game, I personally believe the Core Guardian is the best of the game's in-game boss battles. This is a boss with 3 distinct phases to contend against, giving this fight a real sense of dynamicism, where Phase 1 has you fighting the hammer that will either crash into you, fire bullets, or swing all the way around this trippy arena, doing its best to kill you. It's not too hard, but it does take a while, and it's one where you need to keep your greed in check. Plus, the music is pretty ominous here. Phase 2 is the dragon form, and unfortunately, it's kind of a nothing phase because while it is flying around and it does have some neat enough attacks, it goes into the background, which is a neat visual effect. The fact is, it's a massive hitbox, and anything with piercing or splash damage is going to hit it multiple times, just absolutely shredding his HP. But once the dragon goes down, the reactor goes critical, and it's time for Phase 3. This final phase against the core soldier is the definition of a burn phase, being simple to grasp but moving at a breakneck pace to cap off this intense boss battle. In my opinion, it acts as an excellent closer to this boss fight and a fantastic opener to the endgame. Also, the image of him running onto screen and coming at you while running in the opposite direction is unintentionally probably the funniest moment in this entire game for me. And this game actually does have some pretty good comedic moments. Number 2, General Orange. I am Orange! But before the fight can begin properly, we have to fight off Smash Shizaku for the first time. This battle is nothing special, but is fine overall, and honestly, hearing his bit-crushed laugh is pretty memorable. Of course, the real threat is when the Muscle Man himself shows up, and just look at this. You are fighting on the back of an airplane, wildly flying around the air in a scrappy battle that will devolve into a slugfest as you are moving all around the airplane, all while the best song in the game is backing you up and throwing one another off of the plane. It's not an overly long or difficult boss fight, but I'm too busy having fun to care. And remember, this game came out in 1993. We had only just gotten past the point of video game characters having more than 3 frames of animation, and now we're looking at something that, if I describe this to you, would sound like the final boss fight to a Metal Gear game, with how ridiculous it is. While it makes no sense how you can recover from getting thrown off a plane, I don't really care because that just means there isn't a crappy insta-kill ruining my fun. This is always the second mission I play whenever I do a run of Gunstar Heroes, and if I make it to this point, I've officially committed to beating the entire game. I love this fight, and this is one of the reasons why I replay this game so much. It is awesome. But what about the bosses that go beyond just being awesome? And at number 1, this should come as a surprise to nobody that's actually played this game, 7 Force. For those of you that have actually played this game, there's no question where this guy was going to place. Gold and Silver and Core Guardian are certainly complex fights in their own right, and Orange is simple but a ton of fun, but no battle comes close to how detailed this boss is. 7 Force, true to his name, has 7 different forms, and just like Gold and Silver, has a major difficulty difference, because on easy mode you only actually have to deal with 3 forms, on medium 5 forms, and on hard mode or higher you're dealing with all 7 forms, meaning you have yourself a 7-phase boss fight, and that's just awesome. These forms all have their own little gimmicks and movesets, with you alternating between horizontal and vertical travel throughout the arena to keep things a little bit more interesting. And, by the nature of having 7 different phases, he also has the most attacks for you to deal with in the game, even if Blaster Force is a total joke and should really just be used as a chance for you to go use the bathroom if you need to. Of course, the difficulty is not created equally here, and while some of them are moderately difficult phases, others like Blaster Force are a total joke. Ultimately, this boss fight will reach its final stage of evolution when it's time for Crab, and this is by far the toughest phase of the boss fight. I'd recommend new players grab Lightning Chaser for this battle so they can continuously damage the boss without having to aim, and instead just focus on dodging the boss's attacks throughout the fight. This will save your life on hard mode and higher, and you know what? It's still a super fun boss fight. I genuinely consider this to be one of the best video game bosses of all time, and I'm not sure when I will do a favorite video game bosses video, like just a general topic one, but trust me, when we get there, 7 Force will show up on the list. But that's all I've got for this video. Gunstar Heroes is a true classic that has withstood the test of time and is still a ton of fun 30 years later. The entire game can be played 2 players as well, so it's one I can't recommend enough. My only real gripe with the game is the ending, which that signature treasure level of needlessly depressing and feeling like you got a bad ending, but in reality there's only a single ending in this game. Gunstar Superheroes would then go on to remedy this by having 7 million different endings, but that's for a different video. Anyways, that's all I've got for now. If you like this video and would like to see more videos of varying quality, consider liking and subscribing. I've got other videos I've done popping up here on the end screen as well if you want to see any of those, and I shall see you all later. On that note, take care everyone.